coming. My name is Eric Mitchell. This talk is called Make Lean UX. And I'm pretty humbled by the amount of interest that this generated, and I'm also terrified by all the people that are here. Thanks for coming. So if you want to tweet about this, I thought we'd use the hashtag MakeLeanUX. I'm MITC0185 on Twitter, and if there's anything that seems like it should get a response, I'll follow up later today. Oh my gosh. Nightmare scenario. So that's the little Creative Commons thing. Maybe I'm not online. Okay. I should have said that locally. Anyway, attribution, share alike. So feel free to use anything. I'm going to put my stuff out on my GitHub, and I'll tweet about that. And so if there's anything on here that you like that you want to use, be more than happy if you want to use it. So, enterprise software sucks. I want to tell you about how, at an old job, what you had to do to fill out an expense report. So, I had a corporate card, and I'm not like a sales guy, so I don't spend a lot of money on a corporate card. But every now and then you want to buy a notebook, or we used it for Amazon Web Services subscription. You know, we just have like one EC2 instance and use a corporate card to pay for that. So I had to go and do an expense report. And so you have to log into this web application, and you have to use Internet Explorer. So if you're on a Mac, you got to have Parallels and fire that up. You have to like pull down these drop downs that have all of the sub accounts in the accounting system that are completely meaningless to what you're doing, but you have to find the right one for the project that you're on. It's really difficult. You get all that information entered in there, and you hit submit, and you think you're done. It's in the system. But no, then you have to print it out, and then you got to walk it over to the fax machine and fax it to the finance department. That's how you get reimbursed. I will not say what company it was that I worked for where it worked this way, but anyway, you can probably do better. I'll guarantee you one thing, though, and this is to all my friends out here who are designers and user experience people, it was not designed that way. And this, I think, is what we see way too often in enterprise software development, is that the vision and the ideas that great people have at every company somehow are failing way too often to come to reality. And the result is that we all have to deal with products that suck. And I think that it's often in mundane type stuff like finance software, banking software, health insurance software, HR software. I mean, is there anybody in this room that when they log into their HR stuff, they like it? Anyone? You? Where do you work? Bamboo. Okay. I will check out Bamboo. I'm guessing Bamboo is kind of newish. So my belief is that, you know, a lot of people want to invent the next big thing, and they want to maybe do, there's a lot of, maybe not anymore, but you used to get people that wanted to make the next Facebook. I think there's a lot of opportunity in looking at these mundane things, and I think there's an extreme amount of opportunity to unlock. I don't think that companies have to spend any more money than they're spending today on hiring talent, and I think there are much better results that we can get if we just do our jobs differently. Oh, we're going to be over here. Oh, this isn't working. So what you don't see here is Make Lean UX. That's the title of this talk. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about UX. I'm going to talk about Lean. I'm going to talk about what Lean UX is, and then I'm going to talk about Make Lean UX. and bring it together. And then if you know this is a discussion, if you guys want to join in, anything to say, please do that. So UX is a fairly new term. Show of hands, like when was the first, like how long ago did you guys first hear the term UX? Who would say 2 years ago? 3 years ago? 4 years ago? 6 years ago? All right, maybe it's not so new. It's new to me. It's the idea of, you know, whether it's software, websites, products, I think it has mostly to do with websites, making those things easier to use. Or what a lot of people would just call design. A lot of people think design is about making things pretty, and yeah, that's part of it, but I don't think design is about making things pretty. I think design is about making things work. That's what UX is. I think that's what lean UX is. Or maybe even it's less about making things work, it's more about discovering what works. Just going to get back to my notes here. So let's talk a little bit about lean. So I have a little, mentioned this already, but if you put lean in front of anything, it seems like these days you're going to get attention. So anything that has lean in front of it, and if you don't agree with this, speak up. But from what I can tell, anything that has lean in front of it in business refers back to Toyota. And I think it was in like the 70s or 80s when the Toyota production system. Is there anybody like authoritative about this can tell me? Toyota looked at, they implemented a new way of manufacturing cars. And obviously this is an old beat up truck, but they, for car manufacturing, they reduced costs and improved quality and basically became a leader in the automaking industry by following some really simple principles. One of them was eliminating waste, looking at everything that they were doing and saying, anything that they're doing that's not creation of value for the end customer is wasteful, and they should stop doing it. And this is what lean is about. So you work from the perspective of the customer who consumes the product. Anything that they'd be willing to pay for, you do that. But anything that they wouldn't be willing to pay for, maybe stop doing that. It's basically about preserving the value of your product and what you're doing, but doing less work, keeping that value. So then let's talk about lean UX. Lean UX is about taking these lean principles and applying it to user experience design and software development. In short, a lot of you probably heard this phrase. It's used a lot, getting out of the deliverables business. Who here in the room has UX in your title? So maybe about 10 people. Who works 1 degree of separation away from UX? So what does that mean to you? So somebody who raised your hand, what is it?
That's not my title, but I'm a product manager, so user experience is very important.
Okay. Somebody else? If you raise your hand, what do you do?
I'm a developer, but same answer.
Okay, so you work.
I'm a product developer, I don't have a UX person, so I wear those hats and do those.
Oh, so that you do that work too, is what you're saying. Okay.
I'm a developer, and I'd say I get a lot of like direction from UX.
Okay, so you work directly with people who have UX in their title. Okay.
Engineering
Yeah, yeah. I think and I think a lot of people know what you're talking about. So there's a book. Anybody read the Lean UX book by Jeff Gothelf? Oh, just one. So Jeff Gothelf, right? Isn't that his name? He's giving a lot of talks. Just published a book called Lean UX. It's a great book. It talks a lot about a lot of techniques and approaches that. So I'm a front end developer. So why am I talking about Lean UX? It talks about a lot of approaches that talk about using front end development to help and enable success with what UX and design is trying to do. Some of the key things in the Lean UX book and the Lean UX sort of school of thought I want to call out here. One of them is progress is equal to outcomes, not output. So in a lot of companies that I've seen, people I've talked to, people that do UX, they do a lot of documentation. And that kind of becomes their job. They create wireframe documents, they create user interface documents, kind of huge detailed specifications for how software is supposed to work, and that becomes their job. And it's really terrible because you have these creative people that sit at their desks and end up having to just keep up all this documentation about what the software is supposed to do, and they don't actually get to make the software do what it's supposed to do. Lean UX says that that output doesn't give any value to the customer, and we need to focus more about outcomes rather than output. So does that expense report software work? Well, if it doesn't, if the outcomes aren't good, that's not progress. Lean UX talks about small batch sizes. So I think in enterprise software development, lots of times, or another thing that'll happen is that an outside third party will get hired to do design, and they'll design the whole thing. And it's this huge end-to-end experience. It's going to take 2 years to implement, but it just doesn't ever happen. Has anybody seen anything like that? And it's a huge waste of money, and it's a huge missed opportunity, and yet we keep doing it. Lean UX talks about small batch sizes. So instead of redoing the whole website, let's focus on one single thing and redo that, and then focus on another little thing, redo that, et cetera, et cetera. Getting out of the building. I think there's a video from, is it Neiman Marcus, of showing people in the store with customers doing design for their iPad application, and then they put that into their iPad application. Who gets to do that at their job? Actually go out, one guy, to go work with real customers? Why don't we do that more? Lean UX is about doing that more. Shared understanding, so that talks about increasing understanding so that the understanding of the design goal is not just with the design team, but it's more with the rest of the business. You have an anti-pattern of rock stars, gurus, and ninjas. So the idea that there are only some people that can do design and then other people have to rely on them. Lean UX kind of knocks that down. Externalizing your work, sharing things out, making it more visible and open. So what I'm going to talk about next is, like I said, I'm a front-end developer, so why am I even up here talking about this? I'm going to talk about how I came to be talking about Lean UX today. And the story is kind of based on some of the places that I've worked and what I've learned working at those places. So I worked at a place called Logic Product Development. Does anyone know of Logic? Anybody used to work at Logic? You did, Eric? Nate did? So here's a product. Skip that one. So here's a product that I got to take a picture of. I took that picture. This is circa 2003, 2004. guys, do you think? So this is called the Zoom Software Development Kit. And what you see up here, I'll use my mouse. They don't have a laser pointer. I should have one. If anything, for the cat. So this right here is called a system on module. This is an entire computer on this little card that's just a little bit bigger than a credit card. And what Logic's customers would do is they would buy this development kit for a product that they were designing, and they would develop their software on this little embedded system on module. And they'd use their development kit to wire into all the I/O headers and get their display to work and get the touchpad interface to work. They developed the software on this kit, and then when it was time to make their product, they would design in that system on module, and then they would be able to just plug that in, and that's just like a plug-in for memory into their product. So the idea is that you had this separate development environment that was really cheap. It only cost like $400 or $500. And then you could transition straight to the end product. Here's some of the key things at Logic that I think really resonate with Lean UX. Making over analysis, and I skipped over the making over analysis slide earlier. But the teams that I got to see, I was a webmaster at Logic. I worked on one of the customer projects, but really I sort of was a little bit on the sidelines, but I wasn't totally on the sidelines. But I got to watch a lot of really talented people make stuff. And that's really what it was. It was making stuff, making models, making prototypes, figuring out what works, what doesn't, everything from industrial design, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, cross-functional teams, people that wore different hats working together to solve these problems. Actually had a nightmare about that happening last night. And here's a big thing that I hope a lot of us can relate to. Teams were given problems to solve, not solutions to implement. Does that resonate with anybody? Do you ever feel like you're being given solutions to implement? Yes? Rather than problems to solve? And I think this is a way a lot of companies need to change, that we need to recognize that we have talented people all over the place, and people need to be given the chance to engage with the problem, understand the problem, and solve the problem rather than getting handed a solution and here, it's your job to go implement. Because the latter doesn't work. We also had Beer 30. That worked really well. So more companies should do that. Then I went to work at a place called Probus. Probus is a place called, Probus is an e-commerce company. They sold products online, ATV winches and truck winches, like electric winches for the front of a ATV or a truck. Motorcycle covers and covers for ATVs and golf carts and stuff like that. Hunting blinds. So these are different, different brands for these things. And then naturally, massage tables was the fourth thing. So I worked at, it wasn't actually called Probus at the time, it was called Probus One Touch. And it's called that because Probus is Latin for integrity, and then One Touch was, we went straight from the factory to the customer. So when people ask me where I work, I get to say, I work for Probus One Touch. We do massage tables. But actually, at Probus, we did some things really well. And who's read Lean Startup? So that's a big book that's out right now. Eric Ries, maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, talks about a lot of stuff in that. One of the things he talks about, key performance indicators. The buzzword. I basically have a buzzword presentation here. Key performance indicators is you identify what are the things that we can measure that indicate whether we're achieving our goals or not. So for Probus, it was things like the cost per click. So how much does it cost to get a customer to our website from a paid ad? What's the percentage of organic search visits versus paid search visits? We track these things, and on a weekly basis, I'll skip ahead here, we would evaluate how we were doing. If something didn't work, we would stop doing that. If we wanted to try a new idea, we'd get it into the website, we'd put it out there, and we'd measure it, and we'd see how it's working. Weekly basis. Who deploys on a weekly basis? If you're involved in web development, weekly? I see if bi-weekly? I see a few hands. Monthly? A few hands. So the way the industry is going, the companies that are doing it really well are companies like Etsy that can deploy at any minute. They can deploy whenever they want. Their system works so well that they can push a button and it deploys a release. It's already been tested. They've got full test coverage, and they know that this is going to work, and then they have ways of measuring whether this change works better than what they had before. And so they can constantly, that's what Lean is about, and Lean UX is about being able to do that kind of learning. Another thing that we really focused on at Probus was the voice of the customer. And our customer service manager was probably the most important member of our management team. Every week we wanted to know, what are we hearing from our customers? I think and you get into bigger companies, you start to lose a connection with what customers are actually saying, what their problems are, what their questions are. Lean UX promotes getting in touch with that, connecting that with the teams that are working on solving problems. So then I came to work here at Best Buy. I worked on something called local store pages that was just sort of landed in my lap. I was really lucky, I think, to get the job and to work on this project. The company had a problem where they wanted to get information from all the stores around the country and have it on the website. And they needed a solution for how to do that. And I think the story goes, and there's some people, Ben, you probably know a lot of that story, that they went to the typical kind of IT solution vendor. They got proposals, millions and millions of dollars is what it was going to cost to do this. So a few people that work here Jay Myers, Micah, Taylor, Paul Wenzel. Was Paul here at the beginning of it? Or okay. So they said, well, why don't we just use WordPress? And I think in a matter of a couple of months, they put together a site and a solution that solved this problem with kind of the most anti-enterprise software you could think of. And it's still being used today, and it's worked fantastic. They won a chairman's award, I think. It was a big deal. It's the type of thing that when you do this, I mean, a lot of us going outside of the kind of like the normal routine, we feel like we're going to get in trouble. This is the type of stuff that executive level leaders are looking for, is solving problems in out-of-the-box ways that are less expensive. I think we need to do more of it. See what's next. But so like anything, I was working on that and actually got defunded. I was a contractor, so there had to be funding for what I worked on. So I got switched over to work on BestBuy.com, and BestBuy.com was a JSP nightmare. I don't think I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but basically BestBuy.com started out in early 2000s on Oracle ATG, and over the years it just kind of grew and got bigger and more calcified, and there's more scar tissue in there than you can possibly imagine. And it became pretty much impossible for the business to make any kind of changes with it. The amount of square inches of web page that I actually changed in the course of 8 months as a developer, I'm serious, like 4 square inches of a web page. It was the least productive period in my life, if you measure productivity in square inches. So it got me thinking about, so at that time, we were changing the name of what some of our folks did. We had information architects and we had graphic designers, but I think it was around that time that we brought in that term UX design and started talking about user experience. And I thought about developer experience because it was so frustrating to work on BestBuy.com, and that was totally not the way it should be. Like, it should be the greatest thing to work on. It should be the coolest website to work on in Richfield, I think. And so so I got this idea in my head about developer experience. How do we make the developer experience better? I got to work on a team that was led by Thong Nguyen for a huge initiative. You know, Best Buy's been doing a lot of stuff, not exactly what you read about in the news. Best Buy has been doing a lot of really awesome stuff, especially in .com, I think. And there's a whole initiative called Platform Transformation, which is getting off of this old legacy platform and rebuilding kind of what is the platform that Best Buy needs to do e-commerce for the next decade and beyond that. And I won't go into detail about it, but I mean, it was just awesome to be able to work with these people and on this technology. And I got to work on a team that we were doing the front end. And the thing that we wanted to have for front end was a build. We wanted to be able to make a change, run a build, and see the results really fast. Because the way it had been is that you would make a change, and to actually see that, it would take minutes, if not longer, to actually see the result of your change. If you didn't have the data that you needed for a particular scenario, you would wait weeks to get the data in the system just to get your code to flip on so you could see if it looked good. So we wanted to control that. And so we developed a tool. Well, it started as a build, and it kind of became a product. It became a tool in itself, and it's called the Presentation Layer SDK. And this was super successful. I'll jump over to, and I want to credit like a few of the people that worked on it. Oh, that's right. I was on guest earlier. How are we doing on time? At half hour, okay. We'll see if this works. It's Linux, so it's totally going to let me down right now. Should have brought a Mac. All right, well, that's going to be an exercise for the audience members to go look at bestbuy.com and buy something because they're great to host this. So what we ended up doing was a team had looked at the existing platform and said, you know, how can we make this better? And the biggest problem in there was the JSP layer. It was so polluted with so much business logic. And we said, you know what, this should be something that's so simple for anybody who knows how to do HTML to work on. And it's not. You have to be a dedicated e-commerce ATG programmer to be able to work with this stuff. And it needs to be simplified. So the team brought in FreeMarker. FreeMarker templating language is a Java templating language. It didn't have to be FreeMarker. Could have been Mustache. It wasn't really important what templating language it was, but they brought that in. That totally simplified that HTML layer so that it looked like HTML instead of looking like an XML garbage pile. It was really bad. Let's see what my next slide is here. Oh, okay, I'm going back to make now. Okay, so anyway, the results of this were phenomenal, and there's great people on it. Jay Finch, Corey Roloff, Eric Mason, Thong Nguyen was the manager that pulled this team together, and Ben, I don't think I'm exaggerating that a lot of things, it was like one of the first things I ever saw where they actually, what's the opposite of de-scoping? They actually did more, way more than they planned to do. Okay, so I'll stop for a second, and I'm kind of giving you my life story, which You're like, why is this guy telling us his life story? The point of why I'm telling you about all this stuff is that we made that thing. We made it ourselves. We didn't go out and buy some vended solution to do the front end for BestBuy.com better. And I think that that is really a big change from the conventional IT thinking of that buying is always a cheaper solution and focus on core competencies. I was going to say that, you know, at Best Buy we did the PLSDK, but a big point I want to make is that it's not about one particular tool. Or as Lance Armstrong once said, it's not about the bike. It's about doping and performance-enhancing drugs. He used to be my hero. Anyway, fuck you, Lance. So, make versus buy. Do you guys ever throw that one out there? You ever hear that? Make versus buy. This is a decision you've got to make. You know, we've got a problem to solve. Should we make something internally, or should we buy some solution? I had a manager tell me once, how are we doing on time? Okay. So I had a manager once, always buy. Always buy. I think that goes against what a lot of us do, just with our lives. We're makers. Who here would say you're a maker? I'm a maker. That's the most hands I've gotten yet today. What were you going to say, John?
Oh, open source. It's neither make nor buy.
Well, that's a good point. I think, and I've got a slide here in a second that touches on some open source. I think open source is buy for $0. Because you have a finished product that's got thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of developer hours and product testing and user feedback, and you don't have to pay for it. So it's kind of, it doesn't fit, right? I mean, it's just total, it doesn't fit that dichotomy. But I think, and it leads into what I want to say here, is that the economics of make versus buy have changed so dramatically since the conventional wisdom was established. You think about jQuery and what you can do out of the box with jQuery. Think about, oh, John, I didn't want to skip over that. Ruby on Rails. Think about Twitter Bootstrap. Who uses any of those three things? Tons of hands. Okay, so let's bring it back to UX. Let's stop talking about Eric.
One comment.
Yeah.
It's never buy versus build or make versus buy. It's buy versus build and integrate, because there's an integration cost as well.
That's totally true.
So you're paying $30,000 for a platform, it's still going to cost another $30,000 to integrate.
Exactly. I think that's exactly right. And that's where we are today, is that if you just short circuit that, you can have something made, tailor-made for the business problem, and for like a fifth of that buy and integrate equation. So not a lot of UXers in here. See what my next slide is. I'm kind of forgetting. Oh, when are the wireframes going to be done? You ever hear that question? Yes. Is this a final wireframe? In my opinion, that's like asking when are the emails going to be done? Is this a final email? I think UX should be fun, and I think it can be really not fun the way companies work, so the way a lot of companies work. And I want to be absolutely clear that I'm not just talking about Best Buy. Like, you know, talking with people at other places in town. This is just the way things go a lot of times. And again, I think that's why it's a huge opportunity. So Lean UX talks a lot about design thinking, that everybody should be doing design thinking, not just the designers. You don't have gurus, ninjas, rock stars. These are the designers. They do the design. Lean UX says that the people that are in the design group, they lead the rest of the product development team so that everybody gets involved with the design process. Because everybody can make a wireframe. I mean, who here can't make a wireframe, right? They're simple. That's the point. The point is that anybody can do it. It shouldn't just be one person's job to make a wireframe. But I don't think that there's anybody who only makes it well. I think anybody, it's just a matter of practice that you can make it well. And I think everybody who makes it well normally, they also still make things that don't work. And from the designers that I work with, I've learned that that's how it works. That there's a lot of failure involved in getting to success.
There's no bad ideas.
Well, they're bad ideas, but we want to find that out, right? I mean, we can't hitch our wagon to just one idea and hope that it's a good idea. And that's the iteration thing, that you have to be able to test things and find out, is this good or bad? Does this work or does this not work? So in a big corporate environment, here's what I think works. And who I'm talking to here is the people that are trying to do design and UX, all 10 of you in the room. So everybody else, you can just ignore this. Get your hands on the front end. Front-end development is kind of the middle ground between design and IT/software development and engineering. And there's always a dispute, I think, about who owns it. And I think that the design front end, or the design UX side should own it. And they should be hands-on with it. They should work with it. A great way to do this is to create what's called a live style guide. That's a product that a design team can make internally. It's easy to justify the time it takes to make that. But don't just make a printed style guide that people have to read and then implement. But you can, using tools like Bootstrap and using things like Ruby on Rails, using templating engines, you can make a style guide that has code that your team can then use on the actual production site. And then you're going to get perfect fidelity from prototypes, from style guide to your production site. Integrate front end with a technology platform. I think that there is a requirement for the design front end group to be aware and understand how the technology platform works. In large organizations, there can be a huge separation, so there's very little understanding. I think that there's a job on the design, even the marketing end of things, to learn more about how it works, to have people in that side of the organization who understand how it works. Handing off a mock, handing off something that's not going to get actually integrated into the application, but handing off something that's going to be more of a reference, more of a copy-paste thing, it always loses fidelity, and that's where problems start to happen. That's where the pain starts, and that's where it starts to suck. If you have something that you can work on yourself as a designer or as a front-end developer working very closely with a designer, and then you can just deploy that to a repository, for example, and have that integrate directly with an application, you're not going to lose fidelity. And that's the difference between experiences that suck and experiences that are great. Start using a template engine. Who here uses a templating engine? Okay, who's a web developer? Who does web development? Are you using a templating engine like Mustache or FreeMarker or Velocity? So maybe about half. I think it's great technology. I think what's really cool is front-end templating. So those things that are implemented with JavaScript as well as more typical back-end things. So like Mustache, for example, MinneBar, where you can have a template that's used to construct the page on the back end, send that page out to the client, and then the client does some activity on the page, and you only have to ask for more data from the back end, and then you can create more of that page using the same exact template. Create a system to go from ideas to prototypes to production code and automate it. So this pulls the UX design and the business team into the development of stuff that's actually going to go live. Getting back to lean, it's about, is the stuff that you're working on, is the stuff that you're touching, going to go in the end product or not. If you're working on a document, that might be a good thing to be working on, but it's not going to go into the end product. And what Lean says is that that is a target for elimination. Sounds kind of target for elimination. So to finish up here, and I think I'm over by a minute. Filling out an expense report doesn't have to suck. So I hope some of the stuff I've talked about might inspire you to go create a better expense report so that I don't have to get mad. Thank you.